it is often too easy to refer to patient safety to real people who are harmed or who died as statistics. We become statistics. We become graphs. We become labeled adverse outcomes. So the human part of patient safety often gets lost. I think what I have learned in dealing with patients now globally is we see a medical error from the very beginning to the very end. We are the only ones most likely to have seen the whole process of that error. And so we embody so much knowledge that we not only want to share, but we need to share. Consumers bring a fresh perspective. We see healthcare through a very, very different lens. And it's a great teaching opportunity. So when patients tell their story, there's people in the audience connecting immediately with their department, with their patients, wondering what their policy is. If we're recommending solutions, they're going to go back and remember those and hopefully implement. So we are not just sad stories, although the stories by themselves are sad. They are powerful reminders of the humanness of this whole situation of patient safety and medical error, as well as their powerful teaching tools that hopefully ignite people to go back to their own institution or their practice and implement change.
August 9th, 2003, I received a phone call that obviously I will remember for the rest of my life. It was my wife at the time, Tara, calling me from Halifax, where she was vacationing with our daughter and her family, to tell me that Paige, my daughter, had just been diagnosed with cancer, and that they were flying back on a emergency flight. Eventually, we went through the system and we got a diagnosis of a Wilms tumor of the kidney. We were told that she couldn't be operated on. We would use chemotherapy to try to shrink the tumor because it was too large to be resected as of yet. 8 weeks later, we came to the realization that she had been diagnosed for the wrong type of cancer, and in fact, all the chemotherapeutic agents that have been pumped into her for the last 2 months were useful only in destroying the healthy cells of her body. And she spent the last month of her life with her abdomen cut open in ICU.
Kevin suffered from something called hypercalcemia, which to the layperson means that calcium was not going into his bones as it should. It was actually going into his bloodstream. His bones were being starved, and the viscosity of his blood was altered. And as a consequence, he died of a massive heart attack. But while he was in hospital, there were no systems in place to track, if you like, his deteriorating condition. He was describing things, neurological problems, like crazy things coming into my head. He became increasingly dehydrated. His renal function was already at 50% and tumbling. And nobody at all, just seemed to understand the degree to which he was deteriorating.
One day I have a duty on telephone, and anonymous doctor provided me with information that 5 children were died in the hospital, and nobody take an examination why they so sudden died in the hospital. I were next day at the hospital by the director and asked him about this. Is it intra-hospital infection or not? He answered, "Oh no, you are looking for hot news, but the topic is very clearly. They were children which were between 34 and 39 weeks of pregnancy. They were weaker, and that's why they died."
But that wasn't the truth.
No, it wasn't the truth.
I believed that there was someone in charge of patient safety, and I learned pretty much to my shock that at least in my country, there's no entity, there's no body in charge of making sure that we're safe when we go to a hospital. And another thing that surprised me was that information that we're given as consumers and patients is incomplete. And that, for example, like in my son's case, I did not get any information warning me that jaundice could cause brain damage. It was not in the prenatal books. It was not in my handout that the hospital gave me. No doctor, no nurse, nobody told us, and throughout my birthing classes, my breastfeeding classes, nobody told me that this was used to be the second leading cause of brain damage or cerebral palsy in children.
It was the first time that in hospital which had very, very nice references, which is a very good hospital, that all doctors said, oh, it could be happen in my hospital, Klebsiella pneumonia. Klebsiella pneumonia, this bacteria was the cause of die for these 5 children.
Well, so there was a cover-up and people didn't want to accept what was happening.
Yes.
You see, there's nothing worse for a mother than to see her son die right before her eyes. And then again, I say, maybe there is something worse. It's worse if the circumstances and the happening isn't properly honoured. It's worse if through fear, people will hide the truth.
I mean, I know, and I've been told it's irrational, but as a mom, innately we believe that we are to protect our children. And so the memory of Cal when he was suffering brain damage, and we watched him suffer brain damage in the hospital, before our eyes. And that memory, quite frankly, will haunt me forever for my failure as his mom to protect him.
I was perhaps typical, perhaps atypical. I researched a great deal, and I came to them with several ideas that I considered as feasible treatment options for my daughter. They were dismissed out of hand. And as it is, here we are in 2005, and several of the treatments that I suggested are being used today. They were being used on an experimental basis at that time as well, and there was just no willingness, no openness, no opportunity to work together.
The initial reaction of the healthcare workers was a natural heart reaction. But once the system, if you like, got at them, they changed. Because when I was sitting at Kevin's bedside after he died, and the attending nurse there in ICU, she was like me, she was crying freely. And she was stroking my arm, a beautiful woman. And I said to her, but don't you see this every day? And she said, no, not that. That should never have happened. And that was honesty. That should never have happened. And to my dying day, I'll be grateful to her, because that was instinct and she did the right thing.
Initially, I was discouraged to speak up. And of course, attorneys don't really like their clients speaking up. Hospitals where errors take place don't really like you speaking up. In my hometown, we've been denied health care for my son and for my husband because of my decision to share these stories.
How do they do that?
Initiate. How do they, or why do they?
Yeah, how do they do it? I mean, I can see a motive, but how is it possible to deny you health care?
Well, it's actually incredibly easy to deny health care. They can, like in my son's case, there's one pediatric neurologist in our state, and Cal has to see a neurologist because of his neurologic injuries, and via a letter, we got a letter saying that he would not treat my son even in the event of an emergency. That's how they can not give treatment. And I thought that was illegal, but it's not. Physicians have the choice and the right to choose who they treat.
If you're in an African hospital where, for example, AIDS is a huge issue, then patient safety around things like syringes must be critically important.
And gloves. Gloves is another issue for Uganda, for instance, that you have mothers delivering, and sometimes they don't even have the gloves to handle delivering mothers. So patient safety is a right to quality, a right to participation, a right to be heard.
From perspective of Ukraine, from experience of Ukraine, I mean, it's really hard for people to actually realize that they actually have rights, because people have still post-Soviet mentality, and it's just really hard for them to just shift to another realization of their rights.
To challenge a doctor, does that happen very often?
If anything, it's maybe one out of 1,000 that you find somebody challenging a doctor to say, "Are you sure of this medication that you're giving me?" Because even the results, at times even the medication that you're given just across the table, you don't even know what it is.
Medical people don't realise that when they don't treat us properly, they're actually creating other patients. We go away sick at heart and sick in body.
My marriage fell apart. We just couldn't be around each other anymore in terms of looking at each other just reminded us of our daughter. My dad has been deeply, deeply depressed ever since it happened. My mom is really only now starting to, I believe, get over the hump, and she's been helped tremendously by faith. For me, myself, this is my life now. To be honest with you, I love this job. I find it both frustrating and also very hope-inspiring, because we have a very big problem, but we have more and more committed people, and there's a tremendous amount of energy growing, I believe. And for me, I just can't imagine myself doing anything else at this point in time.
I know when I am alone, I couldn't do not much, but we as group, we can do many things.
I think the question is leadership. If we can get the leadership, we have gained a lot of ground in Uganda in terms of HIV and AIDS. Not so much a resource. You cannot say that we have gained that because we have had the money and the resources. The leadership is very important. I believe that if we can get the leaders in the health provision sector, if we can get the leaders of communities, if we can get government leaders, those who determine policy, and those who have access to communities like councillors, we would be able to get this message across.
I mean, I saw the dark side of healthcare, but I'm also seeing the lovely part of healthcare. And so through this journey, I've met incredible physicians, healthcare leaders, government officials, and so it's been healing for me to witness the lovely part of healthcare. And I've seen good healthcare delivered. I know that there's excellent doctors and excellent leaders in healthcare. And so knowing that things do work and can work in healthcare, I know that we can change what has happened in the past.